Welcome, everyone, to the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals podcast series, featuring great discussions, insight, and resources on all things related to education and administration. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Season 4 of the MASSP podcast. My name is Ryan Casey, and today I'm excited to have our special guest join us, Principal at St. John's Middle School, Adel DiOrio. Adel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited, Adel, to finally get a chance to talk to you because I think, like myself, you probably consider yourself an ed tech enthusiast. I know you presented on some more systems level conversations regarding technology at EdCon, and you had a full house in your breakout session. So you're somebody that I've been meaning to connect with to talk to today. So I'm excited to have you talk with our listeners about really what it looks like in your experience, what you've done at St. John's Middle School in terms of implementing, new technology, whether it be building or district wide, and kind of what that looks like, some of the tips and things to consider for those that are either doing it now and they're ready to make a change, those who are maybe looking to do it for the first time yet. So just to jump right in, Adel, when districts and buildings are thinking about doing that, what is the most important first step that they have to take before they implement that new technology or that technology initiative?
So the question itself sort of begs another question. Technology itself is not a driver. It never has been. So when you get a lot of technology and then ask ourselves, what are we going to do with it and how are we going to deploy it? It kind of implies that there was a question before it that technology answered. So the needs assessment in your building or in your organization, that in keeping with your vision and your goals should tell you what problems you're trying to solve. So if there are problems you're trying to solve, like inefficiency, lack of space or time to collaborate, lack of access, lack of documentation, having asynchronous work be facilitated in some way, those are things that technology can answer. So if we're wondering how to implement the technology, if there is that clear and compelling why that Simon Sinek talks about, the technology is the answer. So people are looking for that answer. So there's very little resistance if you help them. There's always going to be that resistance when they don't feel they have the skill set. Mm-hmm. But when you help them through the skill set and it makes their lives easier, technology sort of sells itself.
So have you found that because there are different levels of which schools can integrate, there's different products, there's different programs, the delivery models are all different. How do buildings, organizations decide which path is best for their needs then?
Well, there are a couple of things that you take into consideration. First, if it's a specific need, such as, let's say, career development and exploration, your school might look at specific products designed for that. We ended up adopting Zello for that reason. Mm-hmm. Or if you're looking for a way to centrally launch access to different applications, you might want a single sign-on application like Clever. But when you're looking for something on a bigger level, like how do I tie all of these things together in a meaningful way and manage access and manage sharing and offboard staff as they exit, you've got to think of something that actually has its fingers and tendrils into everything. And for us, the thing that we're planning on talking about today is the Google Apps for Education. We've used that to tie together so many of the other things because it fit the need that we had. And it isn't something that is defined so closely that it's only used for that one purpose. Zello's great. It does a great job managing career exploration, housing the students' educational development plan, housing their 4-year plan going into high school, but that's its job. Google Apps is much broader than that. So when we're thinking of systems level, you need to think of systems level offerings. And I am not personally aware of anything that is as broad reaching and flexible as Google.
I would agree. And I actually had the opportunity to work in both a Google organization and a Microsoft one. And, the Microsoft one did the job, but at the end of the day, there was a certain level of just intuitiveness with the Google stuff, with the Google Apps for Education that things seem to come a little easier, a little more natural for some of the different, types of things we were trying to do, whether it was related to just organization and efficiency for some of our, in terms of communication, or whether it was actually for instructional purposes. So, I agree with you 100% on that. So if you can talk a little more about what the use of Google Apps for Education looks like at St. John's Middle School.
Sure.
Like how did you come to realize that that was the correct product for your use, for your needs? And then just maybe some examples of how you're using that with your staff.
Okay. So we have the benefit of having a very supportive community. We had a very large early tech bond as compared to some districts around us. So we had all of the logistical challenges of deploying new devices and new applications to students and staff. I think everyone who adopts large-scale tech has the same issue, but at that point, we chose what was the best device for kids, which at that time was a laptop. But it came with a lot of limitations, things that were limitations across the board. There weren't other options. But also in that deployment, you have the logistics of how do you get access to where the carts belong, and how do you communicate that to teachers, and how do you communicate changes. And in 2010, St. John's became an early adopter of Google Apps for Education. It was a primary solution for our changing email service. We were also rebranding ourselves, so our website and everything moved over to sjredwings.org, which was a lot cleaner than an extension that had a lot of dots throughout it. Mm-hmm. In that process, we also created two separate domains, one sjredwings.org and one stu.sjredwings.org. So by looking at an email, you could tell whether this was a student or an employee. Before that, it was really hard to differentiate staff from students on paper. Mm-hmm. And when you get to a certain size in a district, you can't just rely on, I know that kid. Yeah. There are often staff members that you haven't met because they work in another building or have been recently onboarded. And having those separate domains also lets us control things like who is this shared to? Mm-hmm. Because if it has to end in @sjredwings.org, students can't access it. So it gave us a lot of solutions along the way. This also helped district level configure a lot of those things, like whether those access settings to internal intranet sites and things were accidentally available to students. So then there was that change from those traditional computer lab settings to the device carts. Like I said, those were laptops. It was amazing how students could access resources in their educational setting. So when they're in their English class and they have the resources they're using in class sitting on the countertop, and they have access to the internet and the world of research. It was a completely different feel than moving to a physical lab, and we wanted to support that. Mm-hmm. But Chromebooks have made the game change even bigger. So first of all, they're much more affordable, and at that lower price point, we can afford to have more of them. They're also easily supported and have many features that seamlessly integrate with the administrative end, the administrative console for the Google Apps for Education. And getting us to the one-to-one environment in K-12 has actually released us from the pressure of using tech too much. When you have a tech cart in the building and it's your day that you signed up for it, you find a way to use those computers, whether it's supported by research and best practice or not. But knowing that there's always enough to go around has let the focus shift back to high-quality instruction guided by a teacher who has experience and expertise, rather than I have computers today and I signed up for them, I better use them or lose them. So that mindset was because we had enough. It kind of seems counterintuitive that the more access you have, the less you might use it. But now students just grab a laptop or grab a Chromebook in this case, open it and they're on. They're so fast. They don't have to boot. There's no scripts running. Mm-hmm. Literally, they log in with their stu.sjredwings.org email address and everything's up and running. They already have access, which is amazing. One other benefit for our network environment is that Google in schools has unlimited storage for both Google Drive and Gmail for all users. So gone are the days of I need to delete that email even though I might need to rely on it later because my email is getting full. Mm-hmm. Also, they have amazing archiving tools. So even when students are drafting an email that might have become cyberbullying, but then regretted and deleted it, I can still see it. So I can pull that up and say, right, but you know that email you're about to send to so-and-so and didn't? The look on their face is priceless. And that walks through the hallways and is a testament to accountability, which is fantastic. Yep. So that the other thing is more and more Schedules are tied down by things that make it really difficult to schedule common preparation periods. So if I teach English language arts 7 and another person does as well, trying to get them to the same prep hour is very, very difficult to accomplish. But having asynchronous collaborative space, so we share a Google Doc that's ongoing with my teaching partner, or I can access the staff handbook that's housed in a Google site that's protected by who is it shared to, so only the right people have access to it. Or I know I need my no tax letter, but I'm at Meyer. Oh, that's right. I can just log on to the intranet and get it. But that anywhere, anytime access has just opened a world of opportunities for our staff and our students in allowing them to work on their schedule instead of just when the network environment is available to them or when they're in a computer lab. I kind of shudder to think back just a very brief few years ago to when I got my first desktop computer as a teacher, and I was backing up my grades in spreadsheets, and that was avant-garde. The idea of, what do you mean spreadsheets? They do the math for you? Are you crazy? And now everything is single sign-on, and you just click on it and you go there. It's pretty amazing. Even our tech director says that Google Apps for Education is truly the best thing we ever did for the tech environment for our district.
And I can say, the same for us at a district that I was at, both when I was a teacher and administrator, that it truly was a game changer for the students and the staff. And it's funny listening to you give some examples there. I remember when we went to a one-to-one, our initiative, we ended up opting for at that time, we were early adopters of iPads. And so we were able to have some of the Apple professional development reps come in and do some training with the staff and whatnot. And I remember one thing that they tried to hammer home, which made a lot of sense, is it still is about high quality instruction and assessment, because these kids are going to turn something in on this device, that an iMovie, these presentations that are just going to look like it's going to blow your mind how cool this looks. But at the end of the day, are you assessing on the content? Are you able to check their level of knowledge, their depth of knowledge, and what they're presenting to you? Or is it, you're going to be blown away by the bells and whistles, but it's still all about content. It's still all about how you are using the technology instructionally, and so going back to pedagogy and best practices. So that always hit home, and I'm sure that you guys probably have found the same too, with the type of work, the quality of work the kids can turn in on their Chromebooks.
We definitely have. One way that we've framed it in our organization is going back to Simon Sinek again, that circle, that idea of the why should drive everything. And if the why is high quality instruction built on high quality curriculum and assessed with high quality methods, technology is just one option. If teaching the technology to students or teaching the application to them takes more time than it would have taken for you to get that from them in written form, paper and pencil, exit ticket, then maybe technology is not the right answer. Or ask yourself, what other need is it fulfilling? Is it collaboration? Is it access? Is it research? Is it networking throughout the planet? If it accomplishes something that you can't accomplish without it, use it. Otherwise, let yourself do what teaching is, which is choosing the right tool for the job.
That's a great point, because I think sometimes too, it's important to explain that, and hopefully that'll help your teachers or your staff or even the parents, whoever it might be, with the buy-in to using that, because I think some of them feel like they have to use it for every single thing, and then they get overwhelmed, especially those who aren't tech savvy, right? Those who struggle with that, that knowing that, if there's a simpler, easier, better way to do it that doesn't involve the device, that's okay. There are some natural benefits to doing it. Like we crunch numbers on our copy machine, just how many less copies are being used, because you're able to submit something via PDF digital to kids and they can respond. But it didn't mean that it didn't mean you couldn't use the copier. If it was just easier for you to run off a hard copy of something and use that with your students, that's totally fine, but sometimes I think they get scared because their impression of what is being relayed to them from administration or whoever it might be doesn't say that sometimes.
And sometimes we're thinking it and we don't say it. So it's important to say it out loud. I mean, even this podcast. In the past, we might have had to find a mid-ground location and recorded this live.
Yep.
And now you can have a WebEx or a Zoom meeting with anyone, anywhere, anytime, because of the magic of technology.
Well, now you're giving away my secrets, Adele. Hang on a second. So wait.
I mean, I'm in person. And
That's right. We're live at St. John's Middle School. No, that's a great point. So even, and I'm sure you're familiar with like maybe it's the SAMR model, and there's other ones that are out there talking about that. The different levels of tech integration, and it really is amazing to see all the different ways you can do, new things, new ways that never would have been possible before. It would have been painstakingly, just the amount of time it would have to set up. I see stuff on social media all the time of people being able to video chat with authors and scientists and people in the field and virtual field trips. And it's so amazing the stuff that they can do in augmented reality because of these devices that just it literally is a new way to learn that you were not capable of before.
Right. And often when you hear about ed tech and when you attend some ed tech events, the only point of view you see is from the teacher's point of view. But when you're really thinking about tech integration on a systems level, access, collaboration, and information directly positively impacts students, parents, faculty and staff, administration, the entire community. So a good example would be our newsletter. We do our newsletter in Microsoft Publisher because I haven't found an application that yields a more crispy, beautiful PDF than that. But where do I host it? In Google Drive, of course. But I can publish a newsletter that's 18 pages long that has student faces and celebrations on every single page, every single month for virtually free. Obviously, we have a lot of time and investment and people involved in that, but that's better communication than I would have been able to provide if I had a limit of 6 pages because of cost and mailing.
Yep. Absolutely. So can you touch on, Adele, just from the buy-in from those stakeholders, like how did that process go with your staff, students, and even the parents or people in the community when you guys were getting ready to start using Chromebooks at that capacity?
Sure. Yeah, we had, when we were in the laptop environment, we had an early adopter, a teacher that was interested in exploring Chromebooks. And it wasn't something we already had in our environment, but we wrote a grant to our local education association. Back that up. We wrote a grant to our local education foundation, St. John's Schools Foundation for Excellence. And they funded this new, exciting, in addition to initiative, which was buying a cart of Chromebooks. And that idea of what a Chromebook's like in the environment, we really didn't know yet. We hadn't done it. We had this idea of what Google Classroom was, and since then it has been so adaptive and it's kept up with the needs of teaching and the requests of educators, and having that one teacher have that early access on one cart got another teacher excited. Mm-hmm. So we wrote a grant for a second cart. So then we had 2, and between those 2, people started clamoring for access to those 2 carts. And the teachers who were piloting them said, right, but Google Classroom essentially becomes your one outlet for access to anything students and parents need. Then the feedback came from the parents and from the kids. Oh, I wish we had access to Google Classroom in so-and-so's class and in this class and in that class. And I said, guys, we only have just the 2. It's amazing and I'm glad to provide it. I'm so glad we had the support of these local foundations, but we only have 2. So when we started doing our research on what the next wave of student devices might look like, our next purchase was Chromebooks. We were not one-to-one yet. There were laptop carts in the hallways. Teachers had access to them. It was about 1 cart per 2 teachers. So you just figured it out with your teaching partner there in the hallway who was going to need it which day, which was far better than having 5 and on the day I had it, I needed to use it. But it still wasn't every day as you needed it access. And when you think about how you research on your phone, that why would I look something up on Google? Because I had interest and need right now. You don't go, man, I hope when I get home, I'll remember what I needed in the first place or didn't find a different way to go around the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So we decided that when we bring in these Chromebook carts, we would ask for teacher interest about who wanted to use them. And we had teachers choose. If I had my choice, I would like to keep laptops. If I had my choice, I would like to try Chromebooks. The lack of a hard drive scared a lot of people away. They said, well, how are they going to use Word? We said, they're not going to use Word. They're going to use Google Docs. Well, how are we going to use spreadsheets? You're going to use Sheets. Yeah. Sheets.google.com. But it was a difference in mindset. This idea of it doesn't exist somewhere. What if we lose it? There was a lot of trust to build slowly. Mm-hmm. But when we did that, the teachers started using them in their classrooms. And the first thing that the kids noticed was how fast they booted up and how fast they got access to the resources. So walking into one class, they open their computer and they're on. And walking into another class, the whole class waits and it loads and waits and it loads. And then it runs a script and then you're on. And it doesn't seem like that's such a giant deal, especially when you compare it to when you and I were in middle school. And it didn't connect to anything, but eventually it might turn on with the white letters on a green screen. But that difference in access and speed was palpable to both the students and the teachers. The big shift happened when we had a couple of teachers who were used to the laptops had to trade out. They had to trade carts for just some logistical and assessment purposes, but they had access to Chromebooks one day by necessity. And I had 4 teachers in my office saying, when are we getting that survey again? When can I switch? When can I get Chromebooks? I don't want laptops. And I said, guys, they've kind of been deployed for the year. However, when we get more, we're planning on getting more Chromebooks. When we phase out the older devices, we'll get more. And eventually it was an easy sell. Then we had a couple departments, just a couple specific need. I need this program downloaded. But when I talked to those departments about the cost of reissuing laptops versus the cost of issuing Chromebooks, all of that cost goes back into building expenses, right? So I can spend that dollar twice. Mm-hmm. When I talked to those department chairs, they said, no, the Chromebooks make more sense. We'll find a different way, because the difference was hundreds and hundreds of dollars per device. So when you think of how we safeguard those resources we get through our pupil funding, we need to make sure that every one of those dollars is spent as meaningfully and as carefully as possible. All of the teachers agreed, nope, I think it's time. We should just move. So now we're a Chromebook building. We have a couple specific one computer at a time settings where we have laptops still. Things that have peripheral devices, things that need to plug and run drivers, things like that. And then we have 2 classrooms that have iPads. One is an art room because of how they use the iPad to showcase student work. And the other is our classroom that uses the iPads for assistive technology and communication. But other than that, everything here is Google. Our staff handbook is a site run through Google. Every form you could possibly need, every schedule you could possibly need, my schematics and logistics for PSAT and MSTEP, everything is available in our Google Drive, safeguarded by access to whom and why. We can set those when a parent calls and says, I would like to review the curriculum for XYZ. You can give that parent access and set an expiration. Yep, you have access for the next 24 hours. Let me know if you have any questions. And instead of, did I remember to take that access away for that parent? It just does it automatically, which gives them the access they need and safeguards access within the building at the same time. So it just accomplishes a lot of things that I used to accomplish with 1,000 sticky notes. I'm not saying I'm sticky note free, but I have a lot fewer.
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned so many just great suggestions and best practices, from letting your teachers have enough time to explore with the device, having them model it for others. It almost becomes like in a way a train the trainer. But if you have respected staff that are taking the lead on things, you're going to get more buy-in that way. You're giving them the choice of, do you want to switch? Do you want to stay with what you're comfortable with for now? And then you're kind of letting the tool of the device sell itself eventually, but not to the point that you're drawing a hard line. Because as you mentioned, you guys are still offering, you have a couple classrooms where it makes more sense to best support the student learner. You still have iPads in a couple of rooms, you still, for those reasons. So I think that's great. Sadly, I actually know, I have a family member that worked at a high school, and they were giving a device that was going to become one-to-one in their building. They got the device, I think it was 1 week before the students did. And it's like, without any training, professional development, and that's such a crazy thought. So it sounds like you guys really did take the time and the thoughtfulness and the right approach to introduce that. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, Adel, if you can just talk a little bit. So we have schools that are still all over the map right now with how they are using different technology tools, whether it be, they might be on, bring your own device. There might not be any technology access. They might have been doing it so long, they're ready to up the game and switch to a different device. What advice do you have for others who are considering making a change, again, whether it be for the first time or getting ready to, revamp up on something they've already been doing?
I guess in answering that question, I have to give a lot of thanks to a couple of different departments, because this would not have rolled out this way had it not been tied to a much larger vision. Our technology director and our curriculum office have coordinated so closely on how these devices will fulfill the why of what the school district is doing. I would say to any district that's considering either re-upping, either supplementing their own devices now or doing this in the first place, don't start with the what. Because if you start with the what and you go, here are these things, find a way to use them, well, they make a great paperweight, and the cabinet is a good place to set my lamp.
Yeah.
We've got to find the purpose that it fulfills. Otherwise, it's a standalone side task. Our teachers are busy enough that we need to help them safeguard their time. We know that they will work themselves into a lather. We know this. They're so dedicated. But instead of going, we need to learn this separate thing, listen to what they have to say and help them understand how these things help address their own needs and the needs of instruction for our students. So when you do go to roll this out, after you've made those decisions on the what, based on your why, when you do go to roll this out, don't roll out everything all at once and done, because I guarantee it'll be wrong. I'm an over planner from the word go. So some of the colleagues of mine who are listening to this going, yeah, right, Adele, nobody believes that. I still always hold on to that perfect is the enemy of done. If you wait until everything is perfect to roll it out, technology will be expired and you will find that one implementation variable that you had not anticipated. Just be okay with input. Invite your staff to pop holes in your plan, because they'll tell you what's not working if you invite them to do so.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to notice and be unhappy about it, even if you don't invite them. But if this whole thing is to serve the purposes of high quality education, you want the input. You want to be able to improve the system as you go. Because if you backed up till 2010 when we were an early adopter and you said, is this what it looked like? No. Google has changed. Classroom, first of all, came into existence, then changed. Google Drive has changed. I remember when you couldn't nest folders in Google Drive, so your organization did not work at all. You had to use different nomenclature for each of the files to be able to find them. As it changes, we change. Common naming conventions, for instance, it's a must for me. Is it a must for teachers? I don't care how they find their stuff, but for me, they can always find my stuff the exact same way. So my consistency from my end, if I change, I make sure I know. If I change, one more time. If I change, I make sure the teachers know why, and I make sure they know how it changed, so that there's nothing from their end that creates more resistance or more difficulty in them being able to do what I pay them and hire them to do.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Adele, I just want to say thanks again for taking the time to chat with us on the MASSP podcast. Again, season 4 is underway. We're just about 10 episodes in. We have a few more scheduled for the year. So if anybody wants to listen to those, they can head on over to massp.com/podcast. Adele has been gracious enough. She's going to also give us a few slides to kind of talk about some of the different example about using the Google Apps for Education that we will connect to this podcast for anybody that is listening. If you want to see some visual examples, if that's the type of learner you are, we will have that. You can actually reach out to Adele by connecting to her email on the St. John's Middle School website. You can also connect with her on Twitter, and just correct me if I'm wrong, Adele, it's at ADEL DIORIO. So Adel DiOrio. Find her on social media. Thanks again, Adele, for your time. I really appreciate the insight. It was good to finally connect with you. And
My
to
pleasure.
all of our listeners, thanks for listening. Again, season 4, a few more episodes coming out this season yet. So be sure to check those out. Thanks for listening and have a great day.